Welcome, everybody. I I'm very eager to play with you this morning about the carrying forward idea and about language and about the special qualities of language and crossing the language of focusing with the language of spirituality. There's a lot of stuff here, including a very riveting, for me, poem that I want to share with you. So we'll see if I can keep it all in line so that it will open up and flow naturally and not be cramped, because there's too much that I have to play with you with. So let's see how we do. Let's take a breath and just get ready to greet the week with each other. Greet the day and greet the topic, the great carrying forward. I'm wondering if when you read that topic, you thought it differently to say the big carrying forward or the great carrying forward, and just carrying forward that we're used to talking about. Did it feel different to you to think of it that way? I'm curious if anybody had a feeling like, well, is that different to talk about the great carrying forward or the big carrying forward? Did you have any thought about it?
It certainly feels different.
It does. Certainly.
Yeah. And it almost like expands your perspective in a way of it. It allows me to sense into something larger.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it feels true in a way. It feels like, yeah, that does need to be talked about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That did just what I wanted it to do. You know, language is not a thing. You know, you don't, a word doesn't, it doesn't have a thing in it. A word, as Jean teaches us, points to something, points to an experience. And we get into amazing trouble throughout history thinking that words are them. And we fight battles over words, and we take over words, and we forbid words and all kinds of things. So when we as focusers want to think about the amazing job that language does carrying us forward, making reality, making the way that we can think. There was a quote, I was trying to remember it this morning, and maybe about how man lives in the house of language. Do you know that quote? Something about how we live from meaning, and meaning we find in the house of language. We'll all sort of look it up and share it next time, maybe. But the language of the great carrying forward. Does anybody have anything else to say about how you respond to that? Glad about how we're taking it in.
Yeah, I can put something in here. What comes to me is with the great carrying forward, there's a sense of inevitability, that it's going to continue carrying forward, whether I, Jonathan, have a stop process or not.
Yeah. And an inevitability, and it's sort of unstoppable, right? As the individual has a stopped process.
I really appreciate hearing that facet, Lynn, of inevitability and unstoppable. Um, that 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 feels lovely. That wasn't where I had gone with it. You had asked, does anybody have any thoughts? And it's so interesting. I didn't think about it, but I did have like a felt sense of it. And um, I liked it. I resonated with it. And I didn't stop to really think about it. And so when you're asking us to do that, I think for me, it was this sense of bigger than me, right? Which is also in what Jonathan just said in his inevitability. Regardless of whether my own stopped process doesn't go forward, there's the large going forward. Um, I I guess for me it had echoes of like the great turning, like socially, culturally. Uh, are we as a species going to go forward, or is there going to be a big stopped process or whatever? But not to get existential about it, but I just love the sense of larger than small self. So I guess that's all I'll say for now.
Yeah. Why not get existential about it, Rosa?
Well, that's next week. No, so oh, I was just joking. I said that's next week.
Next week. Oh, yeah. I was agonizing yesterday thinking about our meeting this morning, because there's so much I would love us to talk about, and we will have a follow-up at some point because we can't put it all in this one. But yes, let's see just for a minute. We have an individual carrying forward, and then we have another level of carrying forward that's has an inevitability about it. And then maybe we have another, or maybe all carrying forward has an inevitability about it. And then we have something that's cultural and social and communal. And then we have something that's even larger, the big carrying forward that's existential, that that has to do with evolution, that has to do with life, that maybe has to do with more than humans, right? Let's see if we can get our minds around those levels. In one of the papers that I wrote, I was introducing the term, I think, to the psychoanalysts, and quoted Jean as saying, carrying forward is something that we all know, and that when he made up and he invented that term, everybody took to it immediately because it's something that we all know. And that when people would ask him, academics or people would ask him what that term meant, he would say, instead of trying to define it, wait a few minutes, you'll know. And then as the conversation progressed, there would be an instance of carrying forward, and he would say, there it is. So let's do what Jean did and just say, where is it? How do we notice it? Such a vital, fundamental concept that all of Jean's philosophy, but all of the kind of perspective of what the analysts call developmental thrust or life flow, or
What was the word you used? Developmental what?
developmental thrust.
Thrust.
The developmental thrust would be, does that say something the same?
To me, it seems like evolvement.
Evolvement, lovely. Evolvement.
Carrying forward to me is, yeah, I know it because something new, like it's something new
It's something new,
I didn't have before.
something new you didn't have before. And yet in it, when you say that, I say, yes, something new, and often surprising. There's often this little surprise in a moment of carrying forward. And yet there's some continuity in it also.
Yeah. Like something new and something true, almost like something that makes sense in a way that fits.
Yeah. Something new and something true, and something that has some continuity that we've known already. So it's not like out of the blue. That's a different thing, the out of the blue.
It's like something I should have known, almost like when I get that, it's like, oh yeah, that.
Right, that's right. The the carrying forward process when we're thinking or writing or a poem or something has the feeling of, oh, of course. Or in a conversation, somebody says that, right? Like we've had each time in this already conversation. Oh, yes.
I also feel there's a synthesis of pre-existing elements in this, some kind of synthesis that keeps the connection from current to the future or something like that.
Yes, from the current to the future.
For me, I'd add to that, it's like an experience of an action step with a sense of rightness and also a sense of an energy flowing with the action step or carrying the action step in some kind of way, whatever. And there's a sense of rightness.
Right. Yes. The sense of rightness. And the sense of action step, meaning, that's interesting, Steve, that action step. Because there's also something in the carrying, right? You're in the carrying forward, there's something about being carried, right? It, as Jean would say, it has to come. I can't make that carrying forward action step all by myself. What do you think of that? The action step of it. And when I think of that, I think I'm intending something or willing something. I'm doing something, opening to something. And I'm being carried forward. And it has to come.
I think it's a both of those things when you use the word and sort of picking up on a feeling that I had about the Jonathan's words about the inevitability, whether there's a stoppage for us or not.
Mm-hmm.
I still think we matter, and there's something even further with the carry, or I don't know, something more with the carrying forward if we happen to add to it by our being carried forward or our action. Sort of like the big choir. I was reading that recently.
Say a little more about the big choir.
Well, that the notion, the metaphor is that we're all part of a larger choir, and the richness of the movement of the choir, it relies on the singers, and and stoppage keeps us from singing our part or something like that.
Yes. Donna Ormond, who's a psychoanalytic colleague of mine, wrote a book about the inner chorus and all of the voices that we have within us that are, sorry for the noise here, that are nourishing us and informing us and maybe arguing with us and all kinds of things all the time. That inner chorus. And with your metaphor, Steve, I think of, well, sometimes some of those inner chorus, they're a little off key, or they have a cough and they start coughing in the middle, or maybe they just stop or something like that. And the inner chorus still goes on, but there could sort of be stoppage within it. That was my little image there of that. But I think we're talking about the different levels of carrying forward. The individual one, where there might be a blockage, and I might be trying to write a line to a poem or something, and it just won't come, and it has to come, and then all of a sudden it will come, and it isn't as if I have nothing to do with it. I'm receptive to it. I'm waiting for it, right? I'm intending it. And my conscious mind can't produce it. It's not something that is linear and logical. And in that way, it has to come. And actually, focusing is this process of making a receptive space for it to come. And then it has to be ready to come. And there is, as Jonathan says, when it comes, there's a sense of inevitability. Like, oh, of course, it's like that.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please.
There's also the sense, as you said this, there's like almost a paradox there. Yeah, we're receptive to it, it comes, but when it comes, we also have to write it down, so to speak, in the poem. Like there is this element of will, even in focusing, we set up the environment. So it's, we need to do something. It's like an inner movement, inner willingness to respond to what comes, so that life keeps moving.
Yes, I love that. Yes. When you said, yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And sometimes I find it's funny that I almost choose not to have the inner willingness. Like there's something, it's just such a, like a little spot. There's a choice there almost, is my sense, but that's all I wanted to say. I want to hear you.
Well, let me mark what you said, that there's an inner choice there, that we can't do it consciously, intentionally, willfully, by ourselves, and it needs us to do it. It can't do it without us.
Yeah, like we need to respond in some way. Yeah,
we need to respond. And the little excitement I had was thinking, well, we are interaction. That's what we're made of, right? That's what the world is made of. That's what everything is made of, interaction first. And there's that interaction of it coming, and it has to come, and we have to then respond to it, right? And interact with it. We have to write it down. We have to honor it. Maybe we have to argue with it. Maybe we have to be mad at it. And that's somehow what we are, is this interaction of it and us, a conscious and explicit and implicit. Does-
What keeps, I'm sorry, you want to go?
Please, John.
What keeps coming up for me is being touched. I'm about to see a son that I haven't seen in person for a very long time. And when I talk to him, I mean, it literally feels like I'm being touched physically. I needed to add that. That is there too, being touched.
Yes, yes, yes.
And this carrying forward for each of us individually leads to some evolution. It feels like in each of us as we do take these steps. And I used to have the sense that our country was evolving, and more lately it's been frightening because it feels like something has stopped some of that evolution. But I guess when I'm thinking about this now, if each of us is evolving in some way, and if we can be out there in any way with that, maybe we can make some little ripples in the country overall. But at least we can do some evolving amongst ourselves. But the evolution, I think, is an important concept that Rosa brought up.
Wow, thank you, Nancy. That is so exciting when you say that. That's the spot that I want us to be able to open up here. The spot right there where we're saying there's something inherent about life, about being human, but maybe even more than being human, about life, that's an interaction of carrying forward, that has an inevitability, an unstoppability. It's in its nature. Let me just catch this because I'll lose it. that has stoppage, that has all kinds of pullbacks and holdbacks and tragic things and all kinds of stuff, and that it's unstoppable inherently in life, some life flow. And we can feel it in little moments in ourselves, always, and saying, oh, yes, it's like that, or that's the right word. And we feel it, we feel touched by it. We are touched. Now, if we recognize that as part of, not only part, is as fundamental to our life being, to life itself, that's the carrying forward. Then what about this next level? If this is happening in us as individuals, does it happen in our country? in our communities? Does it happen in our cultures, in our worlds? Is this a parallel experience where we carry forward even when we have stopped process, and even when we refuse, there's something unstoppable, and that society has this, and our countries have this, our culture has this, our histories, that there's some kind of evolution from our early beginnings as cave people till now, that no matter what happens, there will be this life force that is always there, that I'm calling the great carrying forward. What do we think of that? Is there that parallel on those levels? Do we stop believing in carrying forward when we get to the level of our country and we say, oh my God, we're going to hell in a handbasket? We're hanging off the cliff and it's going to all fall apart.
Lynn, that is so beautiful. I'm just seeing that there's a number of people who have their hands raised.
Oh, thank you.
And I know that you don't often see that. And so I'm wondering if there's someone who is tracking that for you right now.
Thank you, Rosa. You're the one. I very much appreciate you doing that, Rosa. And you notice that there was that moment here. Here we are at this point, and I didn't want to lose it, and nobody wanted to lose it, and so maybe several hands were up. We're all eager to speak into that moment. So Rosa, if you would be my assistant, I appreciate it.
Sure. And part of me wants to reflect what you just said, and part of me knows that people have been waiting for a long time. So I'm feeling a little stuck with that. Maybe I'll just say that as you're giving more words to this carrying forward and going to the level of, is there a larger carrying forward? And with that, I will go to Nati.
Oh, thank you so much, Rosa. My video is doing strange things. I'm sorry. I can't put my camera off because it's like distracting everybody. So, Lynn, what you were saying just now, I had something else in mind, but what you were saying about the great carrying forward, that is so deep, and how this great carrying forward is so much, it's so much in parallel with our individual and our but it's like, how do we name it? Is it individual? Is it general? Is it, because we cannot there, I think, can I speak of an individual carrying forward? And this is what I had in mind before about the individual level. And the phrase that came to me was this phrase where Gendlin says that bad energy or bad feeling, something like that, is a good energy that wants to be carried forward if there is an if there in that phrase, if we pay attention to it. So I was just wondering also about those stopped processes in an individual level, how when they are, like when something is, and then I go to the process model, and when something is implying but cannot be carried forward in that way, there is a stoppage, and so there is another occurring and another implying and another carrying forward in a different way. And when you said this about the big process, I was wondering about our countries, for example, and when we see that things don't go the way in an evolution way, and I'm wondering about that. What is it about that? How is everything carrying forward, and how much are we individually and as a community and as human beings responsible for how all of that is carried forward, how everything is carried forward. So there I'm just sensing into all of that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, that's a next step. I want to let each person that was trying to speak, and then we'll come back to everybody's, but let's hold on to Natty's question about the individual carrying forward. And just want to ask, what does individual carrying forward really mean? If we feel into it, is there anything that can be completely individual? And let's hold on to the word responsible. What does responsible mean? Are we responsible? And the question about it will carry forward, it can carry forward if we pay attention to it. And what does that mean on a communal level? If our country pays attention to blah, blah, blah. So let's some other people that were trying to speak when I was speaking, and then we're going to weave all these things together, which is very hard, but this is a wonderful group that can do all kinds of sophisticated thinking together without losing any of the strands, hopefully.
Yes, yes, yes. I think Steph was next and then Grady.
Thank you, Rosa. Thank you, Lynn. The word that's coming up for me through all of this and the inevitability of moving forward is the necessity for surrender. Because without, it's important to surrender to that process. That doesn't mean that I surrender to, or one surrenders to the inevitability of an outcome, but to the process, and then having faith in the goodness of the process, that there might be good on the other side, even if what I'm surrendering to isn't good in the moment, but there's an inevitability of it.
Yes, yes, yes. Surrender and faith in the goodness. And that's a big thing, right? To say carrying forward implies that something is good in our language, in our way of being. We think development, evolution is good. We don't think of developing in a bad direction or devolving rather than evolving.
Mm-hmm.
And there's those two elements of surrender and faith in something.
For me, what captures much of what we've been talking about is the sense of flowing forth.
A sense of, say that one more time.
A sense of flowing forth.
Flowing forth, yes. Yes, that's a beautiful phrase. Flowing forth. And we can feel that maybe on an individual. And of course, I'm questioning the word individual as I say it. It's important. But what does it mean? Flowing forward as a species, as an individual, as a moment, as a lifetime, as a day, right? As a moment, as a conversation. This conversation is flowing forward, is a carrying forward energy. Yeah.
So I want to invite everybody here to help out with the process. I see Nati's hand raised, but I don't think Lynn necessarily wants all of us to raise our hands. So I'm just trying to help here because I know that sometimes she doesn't see the hand. So I love what everyone is saying, and I just want to support this blowing forth of everyone here.
Sorry about my hand up. It was up from before. I just put it down. Thank you.
Great. All right.
Well, I mean, are we going to flow forward better, raising our hands and Rosa helping to acknowledge? them, or will we flow forth better if we just speak? How about a combination? Those of you who are hand raisers will raise your hands, and Rosa will help me see them. And those of you who are jumping inners, jump in. Try, if you're a hand raiser, try jumping in for a minute and see if that flows forward in a different way than raising your hand, and maybe the other way around.
Sometimes when things become too abstract, I want to ground them in some ways. I want to make them more tangible and something that I can hold on to and carry it inside me when I leave this place.
Yes, yes, yes.
All this is very fine and dandy. I want to catch on to something. I want to hold, make it tangible, make it more grounded.
Yes, 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 yes. There are so many ways we can do that, but I think we're right on this tipping point here of faith in an evolutionary process that we're calling, that Jean calls carrying forward, that we recognize, and whether we have faith in that evolution on a communal level, on a human level, as well as an individual level. And I would say for myself that as a person and as a therapist, everything hinges on my faith in that process. Everything hinges on my faith as a therapist, with the deep understanding that something that client insists on growing, insists on healing, that no matter how terrible that person's childhood has been, no matter how terrible the person's circumstances are, no matter how defensive the person is, no matter how destructive the person can be, that life force is greater than all of that, and that it, and here we have to come back to something very difficult. What is this it? Sashi wants us to be, not to be so abstract, and here we're hinging everything on it. What is this it? How can Sashi take something from this conversation about all these people, these focusers, talking about everything hinges on it? What is this it? The it that is unstoppable, that wants to grow, that evolves no matter what, that even if the leaders of our country or the people in our country or all of us are sending our communities to hell in a handbasket, it is stronger or something.
Lynn, I would love to jump in as a participant. Would that be okay?
Oh, sure. I didn't mean that you had to give up your.
Yeah, no. I'm just, this is just so stirring. I'm wanting to be very sensitive here. I'm so moved by your question about what is the it, right? And then earlier you had said everything hinges on my faith in that process. When I am working with a client, my faith that the client insists on growing and insists on healing, and that faith in the life force is greater than all the stuff, yeah. And I just really wanted to connect that with a while ago when someone said life flow, like such a simple thing, right? And then you were talking about Jean pointing to the carrying forward and wanting to point to it and say, here it is. Like, maybe I don't have a name for it, but there, you saw it right there, right? Just feeling a huge sense of gratefulness for the fact of Jean inviting us to pay close attention to this thing that is happening, right? So you were saying everything hinges on faith. And earlier I heard Nati say that Jean had said, if we pay attention to it. And so I'm wondering if maybe also everything hinges on attention. And what a wonderful gift it is that Jean has invited us to pay attention to the life flow, right? Because it's happening, but we can not be participating so much. We can just be taking it for granted. But something else happens when we pay attention. Something else happens when it's almost like that doing our part. There was earlier this thing about interaction, and it has to come and we need to respond, someone said, right? So yeah, so I'm just wondering, like, everything hinges on faith, yes, and everything hinges on attention. And so that was the little bit I wanted to add.
Thank you. The interaction is an interaction of attention. Steph had said it was also surrender, and there was another word we had in there. Let's just see for a moment if we could gather the words, and I want to see if that helps us to ground what we're saying, because we're weaving something together. We're weaving something from a micro level of a sentence carrying forward to a macro level of life carrying forward, and the interweaving of the micro level and the macro level. And we're weaving this with this amazing power that we have of words that can do this for us. So what words stick out for you that have carried, each word that people contribute carries it forward another step? What words have stuck out for you? Are there any words that people would want to add that we don't?
Yeah. I'd like to speak to the word attention.
Yes, attention. Yes, such an important one.
Yeah, and I would reckon most people would have heard the story about the two dogs, and it depends which you feed, which gets bigger.
Yes.
So even before attention, there's what you choose to put your attention onto or into.
Yes. But then there's this big thing about the word choose. And we're sort of holding these off because we would need more than one helpers group for each word. But the word individual, like the understanding that nothing is ever really individual because we are interaction with everything. So we're never isolated minds that could, and the word choose, do we choose? It chooses us and we choose it.
I think that's where the responsibility comes in as well.
Right, and this responsibility, and what is that? I like to think that responsibility is the ability to respond.
There's a phrase that's coming to me. I'm loving you bringing up this thing of nothing is truly individual. And I'm reminded of this 60s phrase of the personal is political.
Yes. I'm very proud of my generation for making that phrase.
Thank you, all of you. Yeah.
I'd like to add to choice and responsibility. I always thought that something we don't talk about enough in focusing is care.
Mhm.
There is something about care that's beyond us, but also, like you said, it chooses us, we choose it. Like care makes everything that we do possible. And I think I read it a long time ago. Heidegger, some of you probably know more about it, talked about the care structure. I always thought it was almost like something that made even everything we talk about in focusing possible. That's the word. Some people call it love in a very wide sense. And maybe there's a better word, but care is the best one I can come up with.
Right, right. Yeah. I want to say that I intended to put a lot of emphasis this morning on language and on the crossing of focusing language and spiritual language. And there's an amazing moment, I believe, in our zeitgeist, where the language of focusing and the language of spirituality and the language of poetry and the language of politics needs to be crossed and give birth to deeper and wider understandings of larger things. And Jean had pointed out in an interview, I think it was in the 60s, where he said that he wished that he could bring the communities of politics and spirituality and focusing in psychological, processes that he put in with focusing together, because each of these communities has its own language, and it is often embattled with the other communities rather than crossing the values and the processes of these communities. And so we're doing that in a way this morning, but it needs so much more to really look at what we mean by these words and how these words can help us to think so much more than we can think when we cross languages, when we use these words that aren't just the word that is a label for something in my political community, or the label for something in my spiritual community, or the label of something in my focusing community. They pop, they expand. It's like an amazing thing that can happen. We can put the word carrying forward together with life flow, together with being touched, together with what there is responsibility. Something happens there where these words give birth to something brand new that we couldn't think without crossing them. Does that feel right to you? It's a kind of a miracle.
It's also like we're doing philosophy a little bit.
Well, yes, because philosophy is that. Philosophy is giving birth to new thinking, using words that we put together and concepts in different ways.
There's a big miracle magic to it, I find, when I read philosophy I connect with.
Right. Words have a personality, a flavor, a thrust. They have a life of their own. I was recognizing when my mother died how certain words were associated with her. They were her words. And I could feel her spirit when those words would come up in conversation. One of the words was glorious. And I always thought of my mother with the word glorious, or the word sophisticated. That was my mother's word. But everybody has their own words, and that would be a whole other helper's discussion of what those words, how we are our words and choose our words and what our words do.
Lynn, Lynn, I just wanted to read to you some of the words people are putting in the chat. There is awareness and consciousness, faith and attention, awareness, attention, surrender. Steve put responsiveness.
I love that.
Emerging. Jan Dean put emerging. And Trevor put, Trevor put living alive. I've not seen those two words together before. That's really fun.
Yes.
And then Lenore Green put quiet presence like a haiku.
Beautiful.
Banu put unfolding.
I want to introduce a new word from spiritual traditions in this experiment of crossing different lexicons, different languages, different communities' languages. And I want to see what it does. Are you ready for that? I want us to just allow these words that have come and that have brought us on a kind of journey from the idea of the very specific carrying forward of a conversation or a poem to the large evolutionary process, and can we have faith in it? And what does it mean to attend to it? All these words have helped us to create this thinking space together. And first, let's feel into the word carrying forward, how it is in our lives, the felt sense of the moments of carrying forward, and the ways in which we trust them, or rely on them, or surrender to them, or seek them, or sometimes fight with them, sometimes are lonely for them. And in focusing, we have the experience of the focusing attitude in which we evoke them. When we're focusing, we're doing therapy with someone else, we're evoking them and invoking them and welcoming them and protecting them. These little moments, these little growth points, these little stretches. There's a stretching toward and opening in. And now I want to introduce the word. Well, I use too many words for that movement. Let's say it is a movement of curiosity. We'll use the words in our focusing attitude: curiosity and receptivity that we have. And now let me introduce the word calling from spiritual traditions. A feeling not only of curiosity and receptivity, but a feeling of something in the big, great carrying forward, reaching for us, knocking on our door, asking for something from us, poking its way into our small worlds, provoking us or challenging us or tempting us or something, the felt sense of something. There was a line from a poem that I loved. There have been hands placed upon my shoulders. What has been asked of me, and how has my life responded? What has there are hands placed on my shoulders. What has been asked of me? How has my life responded? And that's from a poem called The Rain. I'll send it to you. But here I'm asking you to see what this word, and of course I'm defining the word as it lives in me, the word calling, what that brings, where we're saying that the big carrying forward, the great carrying forward, is speaking to us in any moment, a tiny moment of finishing the poem, or the large moment of our lives, of our whole lives responding somehow.
When you speak of calling, I noticed when you first brought up the word, the assumption is something out there is calling me.
Mhm.
And before you read the poem or talks further, I wanted to say, I'm actually calling it. Like I got this feeling. It's not just coming from there. I'm calling. And there is this, and then I'm like, is it me or is it it? And there's this weird meeting.
Yes, yes.
Is it me calling it or is it calling me?
Yes, right. And that's
And
our
then,
question too. I'm sorry to
no, it's
interrupt.
okay.
And that's our big question. What does it mean to be individual? Are we really separate? The big question about interaction that we are. We can't be without it, and it can't be without us, and we're it and it's us. And what is this it that is in us and beyond us and in everything?
But maybe the I shows up there in my resistance to it, because I can answer the calling or I can answer my own call. Or maybe for me, nowadays, it feels like I can resist for good or bad. I don't always think of it as good. But that's just a playful thought. That's maybe the me that I think shows up in my resistance.
Yes. Yeah. And it's wonderful that it can be playful, that I can resist the idea that that there is no such thing as a separate Lynn with a separate mind that can make separate decisions. I can also resist, or I can also long for that and say, oh, I'm just a separate little Lynn and I need the universe to support me and not supporting me. Or, I mean, there's a lot in that interaction between the I and the we, right? The I and the bigger than me, the bigger than I. Is there a carrying forward? If carrying forward is has all of that in it, right? If I'm carried forward, it means that there's something else inside of me that's carrying me, but it can't carry me without me. I don't know. I love that it's playful.
Lynn, I love this word calling. I just love it. And you know, bringing what you said about bringing words from other contexts. And sometimes we don't, because we think, oh, they're separate spaces and I might be saying something that might touch onto somebody's sensibilities or something. And maybe it's about, oh, but we are just so much more than that. And we are all of it. And this word calling brings this inner, like it's from outside and it's from inside, because it's this where these, but when I hear these words, it's like these butterflies that feel for the so much more that is within me, but is also without me, and is also out there, and it's also about everything interacting with everything, and where I cannot put words, and I need to bring words from every other place and every other area to name those things.
Yes, I need to bring words from every other place, every other area, and see what they make, right? All the ingredients. We need all the ingredients for this, this great carrying forward.
And at the same time, it connects
Lynn,
with
this
a
is
higher, with a higher self, with a higher self that connects us all. So that's all I want to say, and so much more.
Now we have another word that we have to put in the chat, the higher self. BJ, you were going to say something.
Thank you. Two things. Most powerful for me out of this conversation. First, when you said a word is a label. And second was the request for something tangible to be taken away.
Mm-hmm.
So, assuming one has faith that there's something behind any word, there's something in there, some great silence that really doesn't have a word. So how do we make that tangible so that when we leave this sacred place, we carry something with us? So it almost requires a silence where we can locate that sensation in the body that that word gives. Where is that sensation in the body?
Exactly.
So I would just like to offer one tangible. I go to a dental school where dentists are trained. And so there's a big screen that shows the mouth. So my mouth is open and I can look up there and see the whole apparatus of my mouth almost, because students are watching and learning. So I noticed my pulse and just began watching in the back of my mouth a little bump that was pulsing. And in that moment, it came to me, there is life in me that is living without my attention or awareness or focus. It's just there. There is life in me, in that pulsing, red, wet, beautiful movement. And I was called by that, awed by that, and called by that. For me, that's the tangible that comes to mind as you're all sharing such beautiful kind of awareness.
Right. And every word, every word has that tangible, that physical feeling. If we had time, I would invite you to say some of the words that are the most beautiful words to you and just feel them in your body. We do that when we teach focusing, and we have people focus on something beautiful and something ugly. And you could feel the difference in your body with those different. And words have this physicality to them. We always need to really pay attention to what the words do. Words are labels, words, and we don't have time to get into this today, but we'll do another session about it. Words are flags. The words of pro-choice, life. So many words are flags to recognize that the word is not the flag is not the concept. It's pointing to something, and it has all of its culture in it. And there's so much about that, so much about what a word, the felt meaning of a word. And one of the most brilliant things in focusing and Jean's philosophy is a very simple thing of what do you want this word to mean? And I got this simple way of saying this from Dan Schechter, I think, at one of our meetings here. And it will do miracles. What do you want that word to mean? People kill each other over all kinds of words. The word God. I don't believe in God. What do you want that word to mean? What don't you believe in? Or, oh, I don't want to even get into all of the words that can make for wars. But if we just take a word as the amazing thing that it is, that is a vehicle into something, but the vehicle we're creating as well as it's being presented to us. And we can say what we want that word to mean and how we feel about that word. But it's not about the whole thing. It's about what that word is saying. Anyway, I think I wanted to say that, but I think we need to come back to this special spot that we are of talking about the power of the words, but the particular power of this word that I'm introducing, calling, that has to do with this great carrying forward. Let's have, I really intended to give you time for breakout rooms, but it was so rich what we were doing together. I couldn't stand to not hear what everybody was going to say. And I wanted the particular carrying forward of our conversation to be available to all of us together. So I didn't give you time for a breakout room. And what I'm going, yes.
Could I just jump in quickly with a thought that's come?
Do it.
I was just thinking about how some people and things don't make sense in our own or their own generation. So there, history has all these examples of people who were completely dismissed and who've later become so relevant. And there's something for me about this big carrying forward, this sense of, there's something much bigger happening here. It doesn't matter how much I surrender. There are certain circumstances that are completely beyond my power, my control. There's something much bigger happening here.
Yes, exactly. And I would like to say, if you don't mind my putting my 2 cents in there, that it does have to do with me and with my surrender, and it doesn't. And that's the thing that's so interesting and difficult, that it needs all of us, and every single one of us makes up this inner chorus and this outer chorus, and it doesn't. It's all of us, and it isn't. So I just want to piggyback on that. Yes, absolutely.
Lynn, I just want to point out that this paradox was also here earlier when BJ said, this life, there is a life in me that is living without my awareness. attention or focus. And at the same time, we know that something happens when we give this life our awareness, attention, and focus, right? So these are both true, like it's going on without me, and there is something powerful in the interaction there. And Lucy, I just want to say I was very touched by your talking about how some people or things are here almost before their time and then become more relevant afterward. And so that just threw this whole wrinkle into the question of time and what that is for me. So thank you so much. So that's all for now.
I'm going to ask Dorothy to read the poem now with a little bit of time to focus on it. There was a whole other part of this that we'll get to a different time, but let's listen to this poem with my introducing the word calling into our discussion of the great carrying forward, and to listen to the poem also with the idea of connecting the macrocosm and the microcosm, and the idea of the crossing of different languages. The poem is written by Rilke and written to God. And one of the things that I love about it is the surprise of the way that Rilke uses language to bring in a whole different view of his experience of God, what he wants the word God to mean. And there's something that happens in me when I hear this poem that I feel so touched. And it's a physical experience of this surprise and this tenderness that I find. Maybe Rilke is talking about the whole great big carrying forward being something about interaction of fragility and tenderness and life force and intention, so many things. So I want to invite you to hear the poem and see, may mean completely different thing for you, but I would say let's listen to it with the ears of the great carrying forward and the ears of this sense of calling.
If I had grown up in a land where days were free from care and hours were delicate, then I would have contrived a splendid fete for you and not have held you in the times due, tightly in fearful hands. There I would have been bold to squander you, you boundless presence. Like a ball, I would have flung you among all tossing joys, so one might catch you. And if you seemed to fall, with both hands high, would spring toward you, you thing of things. I would have let you flash forth like a sword. From the most golden of all rings, I would have taken your fire and reset it in a mounting that would hold it over the whitest hand. I would have painted you not on the wall,
but upon very heaven from verge to verge, and would have shaped you in a giant, as a giant would. You as a mountain, as a blazing fire. As the simoon grown from the desert surge. Or it may be, in very truth, I found you once. My friends are far away.
Dorothy, let's give just a pause there because the whole scene changes now.
Okay.
Now, if he had grown up the way we all wish we had the perfect childhood, he would have done all these things with God, for God, with God. But in truth, he did find God once, even though he didn't have a childhood like that. So now we're changing the scene here. And this happened once when his friends were far away. Go ahead, Dorothy. Sorry for the interruption.
Absolutely. My friends, my friends are far away. I scarcely hear their laughter anymore. And you have fallen from the nest, a fledgling, yellow, clawed with big eyes. I grieve for you. In my broad hand, your tininess is lost. And from the well, I lift a drop upon my finger, intent if you'll stretch a thirsty throat for it. And then I hear your heart and mine beating, and both with fear.
So we have a few minutes just to see what comes for you with that. That for Rilke, this is his encounter with God, not the one he imagined with a secure childhood. What is this encounter?
I wonder about the other elements of the poem, the friends and the bird, as both metaphor and the reality of the relationships that we have with the natural world and with other humans in our environment.
Mm-hmm.
Lynn, in my mundane mind, I think this whole today's session has been really an active demonstration of carrying it forward.
Oh,
What that means, and also universality of the spirit, that eventually we are trying towards going toward that universal concept of connectedness, and this whole big complicated tapestry you wove is like a right live demonstration of what carrying it forward means.
wow, I love that we've been doing that, carrying it forward together.
Because I wanted you to give like a really concrete example to me.
Well, in a way, Rilke did that for us.
Yeah.
Rilke says, the concrete example of the great carrying forward is that I noticed a little bird fallen from the nest and I give it a drop of water. And we're both encountering each other with stretching toward life together, with that willingness to take a risk and take that drop of water. And in therapy, I think many of you who do therapy or do focusing partnerships recognize that moment of like, can this happen? Will the person be able to stretch for this trust in this moment in life? It's very concrete, right?
Yes, Lynn, you know what came to me and what stood out the most was what he says at the beginning of the fearful hands. And had it not been for that fear, everything else would have happened. And then he ends the poem saying, we would have both been there in fear, but together. So, and I was thinking how many times fear is what stops us from interacting, from connecting, and we can connect with the fear, with these, even being these shaky beings, and then it's different, so different.
Yes.
The line that stood out for me was, I grieve for you, because it's like life is about loss, and he sees that in nature, and it's almost like a mirror.
Yes.
That is a way of making peace. I'm making up. It's like making peace with it.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah, in our grief, in our fear, in our vulnerability, which is a word from a language that is very much in popular consciousness right now. In our grief, in our fear, in our vulnerability, and in our caring, we can meet one another. And then we meet something that is larger than ourselves.
I think what I'm left with is this sense of, so I'm listening today and reading the poem and thinking about it is how to stay open, when I encounter my fear and my grief, when I encounter, how will I see you and how will you see me and my fear and vulnerability? Like in all of this, how will I stay open to me and you and keep that process going? And when it stops, to just have more acceptance, like, okay, it's stopping now. I will open again.
Yes. Somehow the faith that the stoppage is within the larger carrying forward. Many moments in our lives and many moments in history, there's stoppage, but that the stoppage is within some bigger, unstoppable life flow.
Lynn, I'm keeping with me that wonderful sentence you said just now, so hopeful that even with our individual and our communities, stoppages and stopped places, there's something much, much more powerful that is moving, always moving toward a life forward movement.
Yeah, yeah. I loved, Natty, you're bringing in the word, Jean's word, shaky, being a shaky little being. He talked about, it's lucky that we don't have to be wise and we don't have to be strong to be therapists, that the shaky little being that we are is in the service of this life forward movement. And that's such Rilke makes such a beautiful picture of that shaky little being that we are, that's called to pick up the fledgling falling from the nest, which the fledglings within ourselves and within our world are falling from the nest all the time, right? And we're always being called to pick them up. A wonderful experience to me to have this conversation with you. It's just been amazing. It's been like an improvisational choral piece in which we're all bringing in our words and thoughts and carrying forward this word, carrying forward together. So thank you very, very much.